What's up, soldiers, strongmen, and strong women? I've got a very important topic for you today, and that is which strongman federation is best and which one is right for you. So there's a lot of different paths that you can take as a strength athlete, but I think it's important to know where you want to end up and set clear, defined objectives for your road in strongman to be the most successful. So let's kind of break everything down, break down some myths and some facts to help you on your journey in strength. So before we get started, please do me a favor, hit the like button, click subscribe to the channel to get more content on strongman and all things getting swole in the mind, body, and soul. So strongman, we have all sorts of different things that we can do as strength athletes. Just looking at the list, I kind of wrote down the biggest ones here in the United States. We have the United States Strongman Organization, Strongman Corporation, OSG, that's the official Strongman Games. We now have a growing natural Strongman Federation on top of static monsters. And then we have unsanctioned shows. So these are all kind of work independently of each other. They all have their own separate championships, levels, objectives, regionals, and this and that. So let's just kind of start breaking down how you should approach what you want to do. Now, things we got to get out of the way right at the beginning are the myths about strongman federations. First off, this kind of drives me absolutely crazy. There are people that are diehard loyalists for one group or another that will say, this fed is blank, okay? So some people will say, U.S. Strongman is all light. U.S. Strongman is for novices, okay? And that kind of drives me up the wall because the reality of the situation is all of these feds are pretty big. You know, I have seen very great high-level, high-talent U.S. Strongman shows and Strongman Corp shows, but I've also seen some poorly run shows in each of these groups as well. Now, it's just silly and ridiculous to blanket an entire federation or even entire regions of federations on one label because there just are different promoters with different styles that put on different shows with different amounts of people and different events. So anybody that tells you that one fed is always blank is just incorrect, right? Very recently, a lot of people were talking about USS Nationals, which was 2 weeks ago. One of the biggest critiques or complaints was that USS Nationals is a money grab. And I think this is totally stupid. But let's back up and understand why people say that. US Strongman has a national championship every year. This year was at the end of June. Last year, beginning of June. It's always somewhere in the summer. And it's easy to qualify for nationals. You have to finish top 3 in your open class in order to move on. Now, what that means is you could go to a USS show, finish 1 of 1 in your division if you're the only person signed up, and still get an invite to a national championship. So some people look at that and say like, oh, that's not prestigious enough, or that's, you know, just herding people in like cattle. But I want to invite you to think about this in a different perspective because USS Nationals has a huge turnout. This year, it was just under 500. Last year in Denver, it was about 600. The year before that in Dallas, it was somewhere in the 500 range. And what this allows is it allows Strongman and USS to get a really cool venue. It allows for new, fair, well-built equipment to be purchased. It allows for a lot of cool items, you know, like there was a challenge coin and a lanyard with your name badge on it that everybody can get to help really just make the event cooler. So we don't have a lot of big opportunities at big venues without large numbers. So in Denver last year, we had unbelievable equipment. We had Slater dumbbells. I don't know who made the yokes, but they were brand new fabricated yokes. They were absolutely beautiful. We had a power bar deadlift, which used weighted out plates. Amazing. Absolutely loved it. There were new Cerberus sandbags. and then a huge array of Atlas stones that you can only really get all of that equipment, plus the stall mats, plus warm-up equipment, plus the funds and fees to pay your staff, judges, volunteers, if we have a big show. What this also allows is some of these niche categories. So for example, like teens, a lot of masters divisions, and the really low weight classes, they're able to have a big category. So there's a 123 women's division in United States Strongman. If you go to any show in any part of the country, it's going to be very hard to fill out a 123 women's group. Kind of same thing with a 165 class for men. Same thing for different subcategories in masters, right? Like, it's not fair for all masters to be categorized under one weight division. So when we get these bigger groups, then we have a fair, honest shot at having a 60 plus division for masters men and women. Then we can have a masters 50 plus 198 group, which had, I think, 12 people this year. So these are only things that are possible by having a big, large national championship. Now, also what you have to consider is that at the top, it all evens out. So even if there are 40 people in a division that may feel like a lot of people, it's still up to the athlete to perform to the highest caliber in order to secure a national championship. The best will rise to the top no matter what. So all of these criticisms about that are just silly. And I think you're not really considering what this is doing in the grand picture and grand scheme of things. One more thing about this USS Nationals is that having a big, large competition gives people a really high level, big time show experience that they probably might not get anywhere else. Reality of the situation is not everybody is going to make it to an OSG World Championships or the Arnold and Strongman Corp, but you can still participate in a big, grand, awesome, exciting, high caliber event through this platform. So moving on, let's move into another myth, is that a lot of people say Strongman Corp is heavier, okay? Now this comes from a certain person that believes that Strongman needs to be a certain way. So when people say that Strongman Corp is heavier, they're usually throwing this in with like, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's what real Strongman is. But it's just different depending on who's running the show, what level it is, and all sorts of other circumstances, like what equipment can they secure? What's the venue? If the venue is a certain type of flooring, that could potentially limit what type of things you can do on it. So this is just not true. As a matter of fact, here in Florida, a couple of weeks ago, there was a Strongman Corp show that was so light, most people, top to bottom, were finishing the yokes in about 8 seconds. So that's really light. The deadlifts were really light. Everything else really light. So it's just not true that Strongman Corp is heavier. But there's nothing wrong with that. We should have all of these different levels and styles of show because it's good to have options in your Strongman competitive career and journey. Some people want a light show, some people want a heavy show, some people want both at different times, some people want a blend and mix of things. So because we have all of these different federations and options, you have a whole buffet of things to choose from, okay? Now, what we have to consider is when you're picking your comps, I'm going to fast forward a little bit and then jump right back, is what do you want out of this current moment in time with your training career? There are these comps that are going to be very heavy. There are some that are going to be more athletic based. So when you're looking at the landscape of things and what it means for your journey, I would suggest kind of looking at the full picture and identifying, all right, well, I can work into this competition to work on my limit strength. And then I can follow that up with a block where I'm working on my athleticism because this is all moving events after that. But remember that thought because we'll come back to it. Another myth is that natural strongman is weaker, that these guys are weaker, so it's less competitive. That's just not true. Okay. Reason I can give you very easy is that Ricky Panjanaban, who is the 80-kilo world's strongest man at official strongman games, just competed or just qualified for Natural Worlds. He'll probably win. But if not, probably goes to Mason Cup, who got fifth at official strongman games this past year and is always a threat at any competition. So at the highest level of anything, you're going to have very elite competition. And that's something you need to understand, is that the best athletes go in and out at different times. It's totally ridiculous to be loyal or just a diehard for one group over another, because you're missing out on lots of good competitive opportunities. You're missing out on networking. You're missing out on just getting better as an athlete and a person by being a shutoff to this. So anytime you hear somebody say like, oh, I don't do USS or I don't do Strongman Corp, like that person is very closed-minded, and I suggest you stay away from them. They're probably not that high achievement of a person anyways. So this all, again, depends on the promoter, even within federations. I'll give you the example of Strongman Corp regionals, right? They have different regionals throughout the US, even though they're all same level show, same federation. Some are run much better than others. Personally, I was really displeased at how long South Carolina took as a regional last year. I think the show ended at about 8 p.m. and they had 8 lanes. There was about 45-minute to 90-minute breaks in between events for no reason whatsoever. So you just need to think about things like that when you're picking what you want out of strongman competitions. I had a great experience at official strongman games, so I went back and I will go back again. Consider that. Are you somebody who wants to perform in front of your friends and family? Then probably picking a local show is the right path for you. Okay, but I'm jumping ahead. Let's stay on topic here. There are just high-level shows at all federations that can be a disaster. So I didn't want to just dunk on Strongman Corp here, because I know for a fact this upcoming Saturday, I'm going to the Southwest Regional, which is run by Derek Owens. He puts on a great show. I'm not doing that. I'm competing the next day, but guaranteed to be a quick, smooth, well-expedited, challenging competition. So it's not just, you just cannot say all blank is blank. All this fed is blank. It's not true whatsoever. All high-level shows have potential to be a disaster. Strongman Corp famously sort of botched some things with the Arnold this past year. Okay, they did not even have they didn't have a couple classes do the 4th event, right? So that really shook some things up to go on to the finals the next day. So imagine if you were going in, you had your first 3 events were okay, you were in good placing, and your 4th event was the best one, and you have potential to win that and go into the finals, and then it gets canceled, you'd get totally pissed. So that happened at the very, 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 very highest level in Strongman Corp, which was the Arnold Pro-Am. But it's not always just Strongman Corp. At USS Nationals in Dallas 2 years ago, there was equipment malfunction after equipment malfunction after equipment malfunction. The axles were bending. They had these fishbowl hold things, which nobody enjoyed whatsoever. The order was a little messy. There was a sandbag drag event, which was a little sloppy. Don't need to get into that, but it just it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. Not to mention at this year's USS Nationals, there was a bag over bar setup that was honestly abysmal for a national level show. Overall, great show, but that was kind of a tough one. It's all anybody can really talk about because it was last. So it's the last thing they remember. But mistakes and problems happen in all levels. So to just say one fed is blank is so uneducated and closed-minded, okay? Now, this being said, none of this information should deter you whatsoever. We did go through some negatives about each thing or shows, but at the end of the day, a good competitor is going to rise through the challenges, rise to the occasion, no matter what the circumstance is, because all people in your class are going to have a fair and equal challenge. And that's part of being a good athlete and just a good, successful person in general, is always overcoming adversity and figuring out what to do next. You just should expect, I shouldn't put it that way. Let's say you should always anticipate multiple courses of action if something goes wrong. It's really rare that a day goes totally perfect all the way across the board for every athlete. So if something goes wrong, you just should have a good positive attitude about it and keep going. There's so many examples of people, athletes themselves, making mistakes and overcoming the situation to still win an event or rise to the top, or people overcoming certain equipment failures to still do very well. So many examples of those that should make you believe that you're capable of doing your best in any circumstance. If you don't think so, you got to work on that mental game a little bit, okay? So now, considering all of this stuff, what should you do? What should you do? Should you do US Strongman, Strongman Corp, OSG, Natural Worlds, Static Monsters, unsanctioned? So if you are on any sort of performance enhancing drugs, you can't do Natural Worlds. So just to eliminate that, right? They do drug test you. This is a good, awesome option for natural competitors, though. It's new and growing. They have US qualifiers. The World Championships is over in Ireland this year, I believe. So highly worth checking out if you want to go down that path. But any of them are valid. What you need to think about is what level and what caliber of a show are you looking for? For me, I wanted to go straight to the top. I wanted the highest level, hardest class caliber competition that I could be around. So for me, that was official Strongman Games, 80 kilo World's Strongest Man Finals, because only there can I get 40 to 50 people from around the world, all elite, that I have to compete against. Similarly, that's why I chose to do this year America's Strongest Man, is everybody in that lineup is a killer and I want to be pushed. Now, if you just are somebody who, likes the sport, you don't have any very high level ambition to go above and beyond to a world championship, a national championship, that is okay. That is fine. There's a lot of things where sometimes, even though I want to go to the very top, I miss out on some unique, cool, special events because it doesn't make sense for my training right now. So consider, what do you want out of this sport? I want to give a shout out to Brett Fain in Tallahassee. He ran a 2-day, 8-event comp with every event being super unique. There was sandbag carry up power stairs. There was a mast carry like the Vikings did. There was a car deadlift setup where it was keg loaded. So every rep, you'd have a keg drop into the basket. Super cool. But because of what I was doing and training for at the time, I couldn't participate. But it's something I probably want to do next year because it just looked so much fun. Like, I don't care to have to go in and win anything. I just want to do fun, cool, unique stuff. So if I ever see something that might have a car flip or a car yoke, something really niche and specialty, I might just want to do that, even though it's not a world-class event, because I love strength. I love being challenged. So if that's you, I would just suggest for looking around for those shows that are cool and unique and a good time. Now, with this, you have to consider finances. If you were somebody that wanted to do US Strongman Nationals, Strongman Corp Nationals, OSG Worlds, Static Monster Worlds, and all of that, if you have the finances to do this, go nuts, right? Awesome. Do your thing. But that's flights, hotels, lodging, food, time off work, all of these things that you have to consider. So you may need to prioritize based on your finances and your budget, how much time and what is your level of desire do you have going into this? I really prioritize official Strongman Games because, in my opinion, that is the highest level, hardest competition that I can get to. It is the World Championships, in my opinion. So that takes priority overall. So even though I might want to do 3 other comps throughout the year, I'm saving my time and my energy to train and get stronger for OSG, which will be in November of this year. But as I was saying earlier, you can plot some of these things out thinking about like, what's your training purpose? One thing I really like about Static Monsters, which is just a log press and an 18-inch axle deadlift, that's a really good excuse to go all in on a peak strength cycle. So as a strength athlete, you should be having a big macro cycle, which is just the calendar of your programming and training over an entire 6, 8, 12, 14, 16 months with different phases that complement each other. At some point in time, you should be doing a peak strength push that's typically preceded by a power block, typically preceded by a hypertrophy block, typically preceded by a general physical preparation and athleticism block. So thinking in the long term, how can you look at the calendar and start stacking some of these competitions to line up and allow you to grow to be your biggest and best? Static Monsters is a really good excuse to push your 1 rep max strength. And then after that, maybe you could find something 8 weeks later that's going to challenge your athleticism. That's all moving events. Awesome. That would line up perfectly. So if that is one way you want to approach it, is like, what way can I stack these events so that I just keep improving? I think that's a really smart way to approach this. Sometimes you want to also just double these things up as a vacation. None of my competitions, well, except for one, only one of my competitions has been somewhere like really desirable for me to vacation to, which was Denver last year. So I took a few extra days and stayed in and around the Rockies just to hang out, decompress, get some time. And it just was so nice that I had that competition in Denver because that allowed me to get out and do other things. So if you want to double up, like you're going to have to weigh where these things are to factor into your decision making. Like it's not really super sexy, in my opinion, to like go to a nationals in Lake Erie. No disrespect, great venue, sure worked out really well, but like that's not that exciting. I didn't really want to go to West Virginia in December for OSG, nor did I really want to go to Madison, Wisconsin in December for OSG. But, this is just things you need to think about. A lot of people after USS Nationals, which was in North Carolina, they spent time in the mountains. Or my friend Leroy went up to upstate New York because he's already halfway there just to have a vacation. So these are important things that you just should think about to really prolong your enjoyment as a person, as an athlete, to have things to look forward to, because you're going to do better if you are looking forward to this in a positive way. This is really kind of the ultimate thing is we shouldn't do this out of a burden. We should do this out of like the love and joy and excitement in our hearts that we have for getting stronger, being better, and challenging ourselves. Really think about that. How can you get the most enjoyment out of this sport? Maybe part of that is doubling up one of these as a vacation, okay? Now, what I was saying earlier too, very important, niche divisions. I have a client that's 69 years old. The only chance she's going to get to compete against other 60-year-old women is at a big show like Nationals. So to network, make friends, meet people that are like her, which is really pretty rare in Strongman, is you're going to need to have to go to one of these bigger shows like USS Nats. So if that's your desire, if you're a 123 woman or a 165 male and you want to have a bigger group of people like you to compete against, you're going to have to prioritize these larger shows. That's just how it goes, okay? Another important factor is, are these exciting events? I've looked at shows in the past where I could have done them, but like, man, those events, snooze fest, okay? Like absolutely, totally, 100% uninterested, okay? Not to just rag on a specific example, but man, I was not really excited about the USS Nationals events in 23, okay? Lever deadlift, I think is stupid. It was basically a front hold, boring. Axle deadlift off wagon wheels, like, okay, I guess. And it was a giant sandbag drag. So one of those like 13-foot long sandbags, you'd have to pick it up and drag it back. You can probably tell with the excitement in my voice. Not looking forward to it. I didn't really care for any of that, so I just didn't elect to do it. I cannot hit this point hard enough. where if you are not excited to do something, you probably shouldn't do it in the first place. For me, I was invited to both America's Strongest Man and Pro Strongman League, which unfortunately are on the same weekend. I chose America's Strongest Man because the events were way more exciting to me. That was ultimately the deciding factor. Love them, okay? Nothing against the PSL events. They're great. It would have been an awesome competition. It would have been high level, high caliber. I could have traveled to it, no problem. It would have been great for my training. I could have used it as a vacation. But the deciding event was like, those events, America's Strongest Man checks all the boxes for me with level, caliber, and super cool events. So I'm in, right? And then you also want to consider, do you want to do a 2-day comp or a 1-day comp? This might not mean anything at all to you, and that's okay. But OSG, 2-day show at minimum. If you make the finals, it's a 3-day show. Arnold, same deal, minimum 2 days, could be up to 3. US Strongman Nationals, 1-day show. So just kind of weigh what you want out of your experience. It's very important to not get married to one federation or division or anything like that. Once again, the best athletes at some point in time go through multiple divisions, federations. So kind of the last section that I want to talk about with this is just kind of helping you decide how often then should you compete. Again, this is the only things that you can answer. First thing you should be asking yourself is, do you just need more experience? In 2022, I did 10 competitions, okay? In 2023, I did 2. 2024, I did 4 because I had different desires at that point in time for each year. So 22, I just needed experience. So I didn't really peak or train for many shows, but I was doing comp after comp. I did one almost every month that year just so I could get more competitive reps. And I think that's a really good approach for a lot of beginner strongmen that need to just acclimate to the demands of competition, because it doesn't matter how good you are in the gym if you cannot handle the pressure and just atmosphere of competition day. Do you need to get stronger? Getting strong takes time. Then you may need to take a little bit longer between comps. That might be the 3 to 4 a year approach, where you're doing really good peak training cycles for 12 weeks at a time and then going into competition, right? You can also volunteer, help, and just watch strongman shows in order to get experience and gain a better understanding of what you want out of this sport. There's a seriously undervalued thing in our culture, is just being a part of the sport in any single way. When you are just present, whether it's even on the couch, just sitting and watching, paying attention to a strongman show, you're going to see little things that will be like, oh, that's a really good idea. I didn't think to do it that way. Or, hey, I would really like to do that. That looks cool. It'll just help you raise your XP. It'll just help you raise your experience. Now, actually being at these shows, helping and volunteering or being there in person is a much more intimate experience. And again, it just furthers your understanding of what's going on in this sport. Do you want things to go a certain way? Maybe you go help at a local show and you say, man, I really want to do this next year. As I was talking about with Brett Fain's Southeast Heritage Games, I went and helped and volunteered 2-day show. And I was like, man, I got to do that next year. Super cool. It will help you just get this understanding of what you want, who you want to be, and what you want to do with your journey. So this all kind of comes down to just thinking about your long-term plan. What's ultimately most important is that you build and recover over and over and over and over again in the different areas that you need. So considering, right, all these federations, if one is close to you, you can get really good, easy competition experience if the show's up the street, but it's not that challenging for you, then maybe it's worth doing anyways to get competition experience. Hey, Static Monsters is coming up. Cool. Now I'm going to peak my 1-rep max strength. Or, hey, that show in September has a lot of moving events. Cool. That's a really good excuse to then increase your athleticism and your movement capabilities. So just look at the long-term plan of how you can do this and grow and recover. And don't get married to one federation over another, because again, all the best athletes chase the best opportunities for his or herself, regardless of federation. Sometimes things line up really nicely, exactly the way you want. Other times you're going to have to go out of your way a little bit to get what you want. So just don't get locked into one narrow path, because there's a lot of really good promoters in all corners of this thing. We have some great people in USS. We have great people in Strongman Corp. We have great people that do Static Monsters and Natural Worlds. I love OSG. So just kind of get involved with this sport. Think about all the aspects that you need to grow. And lastly, so important, you got to do it out of love. You should never be just laboring over of any of this stuff. If you have some sort of preconceived notion in your head of like, oh, I have to do nationals, I have to, I have to go to OSG, then you really just shouldn't do it. You're out of touch with something. Maybe you're just dealing with some trauma, or having like a bit of a mood that you need to overcome, but you need to find what excites you, because that's why you got into this in the first place, because there's some element of strength and growth and self-development that got you into lifting weights. Think about that addiction of getting those first couple of new PRs that got you feeling better about yourself. That's what we want to tap into all the time, even if we're 20 years into this thing. So what can you do to keep challenging yourself, to stay involved with your community and tribe, and just love the shit out of Strongman? So there's a lot going on here. I really appreciate you watching this video. If you like this, you have any thoughts, would love to hear from you in the comments. If you want to reach out, connect with me, shoot me a DM on any of my social channels. It's all Stephen M. Coyne, the same as here on YouTube. Thank you, and have a championship day.